You don't go to presenter because then you never get more presenters. So that's the first rule, eh?
I told someone I'd do an introduction. So, hey, welcome to Red Hat, everybody. Sorry, welcome to Red Hat, everybody. This is Alex and Brett. Possibly not in that order. They're going to talk about Bitcoin. Thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed the pizza, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Can we give it a round of applause? Introduction over.
Cool. Let's do that, Jeff. Just sit and chat. I'm in the screen. Cool, so I'll do my own introduction. So, hello everyone, my name's Alex Brice. I have about 7 years of experience in IT. I started off with QT working in the IT help desk, went as an operations engineer, then worked as a network and security engineer, and now I work in governance, risk compliance and security, which is kind of nice actually getting out of the tech sphere, but I admittedly do miss that a little bit. I've been following Bitcoin very closely for the past 2 years, which has been a roller coaster. If anybody else has been following it, they'll kind of relate to that, particularly at the moment. This is Brett Adams, a colleague of mine as well, who's going to assist me with the presentation. He's a network and security engineer currently, around 6 years of experience in IT. The technical consultant per se, so if you want to hit him with any really tech questions, although we'll try and answer them together. That's actually a question I can like to ask you guys from the get-go. I've been told it's about 45 minutes. Do you want to ask questions in between? Because this will take about 45 minutes. If you want to ask questions, feel free to interrupt. I understand we're going until 7:30, so yeah, if you want to make a bit longer than that, I'm cool with that. Cool, so our goal is to explain how Bitcoin works as a means of currency, but then more importantly, the underlying technology of Bitcoin, which is the blockchain, which is the really interesting thing about Bitcoin, not so much Bitcoin itself, despite that being also very interesting. So really what we want to understand is the broader purposes of Bitcoin, particularly blockchain, and how it opens a kind of a new area of innovation, a new protocol for the internet, let's say. All right, so I guess let's go audience engagement. How many of you actually have Bitcoin? Anybody actually own a Bitcoin, or at least willing to admit it? Cool. Cool. Ah, that's cool. That's more than most that I normally get. So, have you actually bought something with Bitcoin?
No.
Never? Just hodling?
Not much, just a few.
Yeah, it might be enough, you know?
Just that one hit.
Yeah.
You had to calm it down.
And another question is, who actually thinks that they, I guess this is a two-part question, who actually thinks they understand Bitcoin from a conceptual level? Like, who actually thinks they understand mining? And what is the purpose of mining? Yep, you understand it? Cool. A few people. And who actually thinks they understand it down to the technical level? So, ECDSA, hashing, I mean, some of you probably actually understand that better than we do, but if you understand that system in its entirety, excellent, cool. Hopefully we can learn from you. Cool. Alright, so there's plenty of ways that people try and describe Bitcoin, such as the following. So I love all the fun terms. So a decentralized digital currency that operates on an open source protocol over a peer-to-peer network. Issuance and clearance of Bitcoin occurs via a trustless and automated consensus. Bitcoin arranges numerous crypto systems to create a global digital monetary system that is likened to gold, cash, and profit. So let's actually understand what that means. So when I first started looking at Bitcoin, so around about 2 years ago, I found this very confusing. There's so many aspects to this, and also, I guess, being relatively young and new to the security industry within reason, there's so many concepts to get your mind around, and actually understanding how this system works together. And once you do, that aha moment is really like, wow, this is a beautiful, beautiful concept, and it's amazing that somebody thought of it. Cool. Alright, so what I'm going to do today is explain to you in a conceptual and linear way exactly what Bitcoin is. So firstly, what we need to do is actually understand how fiat money works. So I love to draw the comparison, and a lot of people don't even really truly understand the way the current monetary system works, and that's a really, I think, the first point to start understanding how Bitcoin works. So do a comparison between the two. Cool, so let's start with fiat money, the one that we all want. So how does fiat money have value? So fiat money, such as this $10 note, has $10 because we collectively agree that it has $10. It's backed by the Australian government, and whilst the note itself has no intrinsic value, it represents value. We believe that it has value, and that's really all it is. So how do we secure fiat money? How do we store it? We can store fiat money in physical wallets or digital wallets in the form of banks. With physical wallets, we essentially entrust ourselves to secure and store our money, and with managed digital wallets, we entrust the banking system to secure and store money on our behalf. Pretty simple. We all understand this, I hope. So how do we transfer fiat money? Both digital and physical wallets enable us to transfer our money. In the case of physical cash transfer, for example, I would take $10 out of my wallet, I would give that to Brett, and then he would put it into his own wallet. Quite a simple concept. The idea is that you actually have the thing worth of value that you actually give it to someone else as, within reason, a tangible asset. In the case of digital transfer, I would log onto my bank account, Brett would provide me his details, and then I would transfer to Brett's bank account. So this is also worth mentioning at this point. This is an interesting part of fiat currency with digital transfers, is that you actually have to provide sensitive information such as your identity to the person that you want to transfer money to. Alright, so this is a really interesting one related to mining, which we'll get to a bit later, but who actually makes fiat money and how is it processed? So fiat money is created in Australia by the Reserve Bank of Australia. They issue it. It's centrally and hierarchically controlled, and it is backed by Australia itself. The processing is managed by banks and clearing houses, which is a nice friction-filled background as to how fiat money works. Alright, so now that we've recapped on fiat money, let's delve into the workings of how Bitcoin works itself and how it is fundamentally different from fiat currency. So this is all about the comparison to how we currently think of money and how we need to think of Bitcoin as being different and better. Alright, so I'd also like to note at this point, and this is a really common misconception, probably most of you actually understand this already, is that Bitcoin does not work like this. Bitcoin is not a coin. That is my biggest problem with the name of Bitcoin, purely the name. The amount of misconception that comes from this is like, it's just staggeringly painful to try and explain to people that it's not actually a coin that you have when you're in your wallet, but we'll get to that one a bit later. So yeah, don't think of Bitcoins as a physical coin. Nice quick one, where did it come from? Doesn't really matter, but let's go through it anyway. So not much is known. It was allegedly created by a gentleman or group called Satoshi Nakamoto, came into existence in January 2009, and whoever created it cannot control it as it is an open source system. Its origins are irrespective to its future. Who cares where it came from? It is here now. It's an idea. Cool. So how does Bitcoin actually have value? Which is a really interesting one that a lot of people don't believe. They're like, oh, it doesn't come from anywhere. Why does it have value? So similar to gold, Bitcoin is valuable just because people are willing to trade it for fiat goods, services, money. It's just simple supply and demand. This is the way a market works. There's currently around about, I think it's actually 13.5 million Bitcoin currently in circulation, with a total possible of 21 million, or just slightly before 21 million technically. So there's actually a finite supply of Bitcoin, and it's deflationary by design, suppliers at least. The majority of its value is thought to come from speculative investors, although that depends who you ask. And it is highly volatile due to its relatively small market capitalization.
AKA the mafia.
Or their nemesis, the law enforcement. So an important thing to realize is, and this is another one that kind of blows people's minds because they come back to the thought that Bitcoin is like a coin, is that Bitcoin is highly divisible into smaller units. So like a dollar can be divided into 1/100th, which is a cent. 1 Bitcoin can be divided into 100 million smaller units. The smallest unit in Bitcoin is called a Satoshi, which is just a nice little reference to the alleged creator of Bitcoin, which I think is quite nice. Cool, so now what I'm going to do is hand over to Brett, who can conceptually explain the inner workings of Bitcoin. I understand some of you might actually get this a bit better than us, so what we want to do is kind of present this in a really conceptual understanding. So we're not going to try, we will sometimes go around the technology that surrounds this, but this is purely a conceptual understanding that we think is a really good way to understand this.
Yeah, understand that.
Cool. Sure?
Yeah.
I'll make it.
So the blockchain, that's what I would consider the really interesting bit about Bitcoin. So now that we understand it has value, it's divisible, and let's figure out how it actually works. So the Bitcoin concept revolves around the blockchain as a ledger. There's one blockchain, and it's public. We're not talking about the test chain or any of those things. There's one blockchain. When a transaction occurs, it's recorded on the blockchain permanently. And the blockchain contains reference to every address that has ever had value to it. So as you can imagine, it's quite large. So where's this ledger stored? Who keeps it? So the blockchain is distributed in a sort of peer-to-peer fashion. It's distributed on all the computers that participate in the Bitcoin network. The blockchain is the exact same on all these computers through group consensus. And it uses decentralized peer-to-peer technology. Conceptually, you could think of it like BitTorrent, and that can help explain it to sort of tech-savvy people. It can also scare a lot of people who think BitTorrent is just bad, illegal downloading things. In Bitcoin, users discover each other either by looking at hard-coded nodes, which they can then ask for other nodes. They can use DNS servers, which list currently up and available nodes. And the user themselves can actually specify, I want to connect to this IP because I know this person and they're my friend. The nodes then talk to each other and share information about who else is participating on the network. So that way all the nodes can dynamically adapt and stay up talking to each other. If in the case that someone really didn't like Bitcoin, they DDoSed all the hard-coded servers, they DDoSed all the DNS servers, we would still have they would have to take down Reddit, they'd have to take down all the forums, they'd have to take down all the ways that everyone else has to communicate to stop them adding nodes. And I even, for my own interest, I nmapped, just randomly started scanning the internet for Bitcoin nodes. I found a handful in a couple of minutes. So it's really quite impossible, I would say, to try and take down this decentralized network. So now that we have a conceptual understanding of the Bitcoin network, how do we actually transact? So this is where we start getting into the cryptography of it. So we know we have the ledger, which has every transaction, but the addresses on the ledger, we could say, are locked. Only the key has the ability to unlock the address. The locked addresses can be viewed by others, but they don't have the key, so they can't unlock them. So here you can see that the key must be kept private as it holds all the power. The key is inside the wallet. We'll delve into that a bit deeper. So let's look at the locks and the keys. If you're a bit more techno-savvy, this is simple private key infrastructure. This is public keys and private keys. However, if you're explaining it to someone else, it can be useful to explain it as a physical padlock and a key, because it has pretty much the same function. So locked addresses are public. Anyone can view them, values associated with them. Because of the underlying cryptographic technology, you don't need the key to add more value to a lock. Let's just pretend that it's actually just a bucket of padlocks and you just keep taking them and keep locking things. Still only the person who has the key can unlock them. So, as you all should know, if you've dealt with web servers, which I'm sure you all have, the private key is very important. So let's have a look at what the function of a Bitcoin wallet does. A wallet is an application that stores your private keys. It is also enables you to perform the transactions on the Bitcoin network. Only the private keys are stored in the wallet, not the Bitcoins themselves. This is probably one of the other major misconceptions and things that are very difficult to explain to people if they've just been thrown into dealing with Bitcoin. They might take a wallet and look, I've got a wallet, I have Bitcoin. Well, no, you don't. That wallet could have 5 copies. That wallet could be encrypted. That wallet could have nothing in it. You don't know. If you don't have the private key, you don't have control. Even if you do have the private key, you don't necessarily have control because someone else might have the private key. So ultimately, the value is locked on the ledger using PKI, and only the keys have the ability to move value. So what else can wallets do? Because the private keys are so important, and also because there is a goal to be a bit more anonymity, which I can never say, on the Bitcoin network, wallets themselves can create new Bitcoin blocks and key pairs for you on the fly, managing this all for you, keeping it all encrypted. That's why, as a user, your trust needs to be in whoever is coding or providing you your wallet. So, just to make sure you all understand, and if you have any questions after this, it's a really good time to ask about the transactions. This is how a transaction actually takes place. So both Alex and I have a mobile wallet application, and the lock and key pair generated by the wallet.
You want to transfer me some Bitcoin?
I can't figure out one.
That's alright. I'll give you that.
My private key is installed securely on my wallet, for this example. I can show him my lock in the form of a QR code so that he can scan it, and then he would use his private key to basically authenticate that he has control over a certain amount of Bitcoin on the network, and then say, I now want to send that to my public key, so he would then sign a message saying these addresses, this value go to this address. And once it's got my public key, only I have the private key to then sign the message. That value can transfer again. Does that concept make sense?
Does this make sense to everyone? Cool.
So my understanding is if you go and have a look at something on the chain, it's also got the history of all the previous transactions.
Yeah, so if you want to delve into real quickly, so when I actually spend Bitcoin, I'm actually spending all the previous transactions that have come to me.
Yeah.
So you can actually follow that chain all the way back. I've in my spare time been developing a bit of an application to try and investigate that sort of stuff, and it's quite interesting and quite annoying the way the Bitcoin network stores that data.
Yeah.
But it's all there. You can go back right to the Genesis block and see everything that everyone's ever done.
Just a quick one. So the way we're describing it is if the ledger's like a piece of paper per se with a whole bunch of locks on it. That's not actually correct.
Yeah.
It's really just like a giant database of a whole bunch of receipts, and essentially it's ownerships of receipts that you can transfer to give to other people. That's more the complex aspect, but when we describe it to people, we just say, here's a name, think of your name as a lock, here's the amount of value that's incumbent against that lock. When you want to transact it to someone else, you use a key to unlock that lock and give it to someone else on that piece of paper.
So we know how to transact, we know roughly what Bitcoins are, but how does this network run? Like, why would anyone in their right mind run a server that's going to need 30 gig of disk space, use tons and tons of bandwidth, just sitting there for no apparent gain? That's where the concept of mining comes in. So we'll look at how transactions are processed and verified, and how this all happens in the background. Essentially, this is a process called mining. So remember back when we had the transaction, that transaction propagates to all the mining, all the nodes on the network. And when I say nodes, these are basically miners. Usually. We'll explain that in a bit. So the mining computers collect all the transactions, they validate them, so they, with the value, use the private key and the public key, this all work. Sorry, this is a signed message valid based on the public key. There's the actual value there that they can spend. And they do this process and bundle it all up, and this gets sent out in a block every 10 minutes or so. So you can think of the miners like bookkeepers of the ledger. They're the ones who are maintaining the record of all transactions. So miners collect the latest 10 minutes worth of transactions, or they're constantly collecting, and they broadcast approximately every 10 minutes. The way that we decide what block to accept is it's actually the first miner to correctly guess what we like to call a complex mathematical problem. You may be aware of hash cache. The concept is hashing something multiple times until you get a set number of zeros from it, just by adding a nuance to the start to make the value different. So of course, if you know anything about hashing, to get a predicted value at the start, that's going to be very difficult. And it is, and that's basically the concept of mining. That's why we're throwing different heaps of CPU power and dedicated systems to do this.
Sorry, is hash cache what's happening, or that's an example of a
Hash
similar
cache was
thing
a concept designed before Bitcoin,
Right.
actually trying to stop email spam.
Yeah.
It's basically just the idea of hashing something, changing the value slightly until you get a set parameter.
Right.
It's a proof of work algorithm.
Yes.
It's prove that you've done this work, and the way to prove that you've done the work is to present the question that was asked to get the final answer.
And it's very easy for everyone else on the network to verify because they can just, they know the nuance that the other person used. They can hash it themselves and go, oh yeah, that's the correct answer, it's fine. So we like to explain this as laminating the ledger. So it's new blocks on the blockchain, but if you explain to someone else, you can either laminating. So you're taking another sheet of paper, you're putting it on top, that's got all the transactions, and just chucking it through the laminating machine. That means the transactions at the bottom, they've been laminated, how many blocks were it? Like 300,000? Lots and lots of times. So in order to change anything there, you have to basically change everything following before as well. After as well. So processing the block secures the latest block and all previous blocks in the chain. So in addition to processing the transactions, miners also create Bitcoin. So as we explained before, there's one person who completes the proof of work, who completes the hash cache, and they are rewarded with a set amount of Bitcoin. It used to be 50 Bitcoins, now it's 25. Halves every 40, remember?
Yeah, around
Around about that.
how much hash on power is.
Yeah, so it changed. But so that's the Bitcoin network is adjusting itself, I guess, in that regard, lowering the reward. So the more computing power you have, the more chance you actually have to win this reward. The more hashes you can get, the more likely you are to guess the answer. So this reward acts as an incentive for miners to process transactions and secure the ledger, keep their nodes up and running. The reward is actually defined by the Bitcoin protocol. The way they get the reward is they just include a transaction saying, give me 25 Bitcoin. Everyone else on the Bitcoin network agrees that that's the way things are done, and when they validate the transaction, they check, yep, they gave themselves 25, they didn't try and give themselves 50 or something else.
Just a quick one. I like to personally think of mining as kind of the rules of the game of Bitcoin. It's what everybody collectively agrees to. If you want to change those rules and the way Bitcoin works, all of the miners have to agree to these new rules of the game. So that's how changes could come through to Bitcoin.
What happens when there is no reward left? Do you think the network will fail anyway?
No, so
2140, the last Bitcoin will be mined. The thing that we don't really talk about this one is transaction fees. So currently transaction fees in Bitcoin are very small. When the last one is mined, assuming that the network has propagated to an extent that I guess you could call like a very global system, there will be enough transaction fees that will still give miners incentive to essentially compete and get the fees provided to themselves. So that's what becomes their incentive in the future. So it is currently included. You get 25 plus a small amount of fees. 25 Bitcoin currently plus a small amount of fees for winning. But in the future, hopefully, assuming Bitcoin takes off the way that we think that it should, you get transaction.
Even now, my understanding is many people find that the cost of the mining, it doesn't actually. It's more expensive to pay for the GPU power than it is actually mining.
And that's actually the case, like I think right now, the difficulty rate dropped. So that means less people will mine it. So people are starting to get money out of the game. But it doesn't matter because the reward set will still incentivize enough people to run their nodes. The fee's optional, but if you don't include one, miners are less likely to include your transaction.
Which is another very important aspect that we can get into in a conversation after this one, but that's the scalability of how the network works.
It's all very
And the
self-regulated.
incentives is a very important topic for Bitcoin.
The other thing is, it's kind of self-healing, self-adjusting. If people go, electricity costs too much, I'm going to stop mining, and then the kind of global gigahertz goes down, all the miners kind of agree, let's make this game easier. We're all cool with that, we're all cool with that, cool. Let's make it less zeros to have to win.
Yep.
The difficulty kind of goes up and down as people enter and leave the game, and so if it gets too cost prohibitive, people turn their miners off, there are less people in there, difficulty goes down, it becomes easier, the power then costs less than mining, and it kind of starts to float around that point where it becomes worth it.
Yep.
So, integrity. The entire Bitcoin code is open source. So you can go, you can have a look at it, you can make sure nothing funny is happening. There's no central authority. No one controls Bitcoin. It's entirely trustless. Decisions about the Bitcoin code are made through democratic consensus, through the code that the miners run. And it is in their interest to make the network as stable as possible. So to touch on that quickly, so if a code update went out and 75% of the miners said yes and 25% of the miners said no, 75% have more of the CPU power. They're going to outrun the others. Their code consensus, they will win. So that's why it's a democratic system in that regard. And as for the stability, I'll just quickly say, because they're mining and their only income is the Bitcoin value itself, it's in their every interest to make sure that they're not damaging the Bitcoin network in any way.
So in your example there of like 75% of miners run new code,
Yep.
the 25, do they keep running on some kind of old
No,
blockchain?
Well,
or
they
you get
can.
They kind of do.
But their chain, so there's a concept that the longest blockchain is the one that you trust.
Yeah,
The way you get to be the longest is you have the more CPU power.
yeah.
So the 25 can keep running,
yeah.
but no one else would trust their
The blockchain will always be shorter than the one that the
Yep.
75% agree.
Yeah. There's another really interesting one that we can have a chat to after this one about how that will probably change in the future called peg sidechains, which is a really interesting topic.
Is there a concept of like a supermajority or something like that? Is it just 51%, you get the longest blockchain, it's over kind of?
Because hash cash in a way is kind of like a lottery. If we were split 50-50, we might be for a while running back and forth. I think in the white paper there was some maths done that proved that about after 8 iterations it would be statistically very difficult for there to still be a tie. It would just flat out come to a consensus after about 8 iterations of the block.
Thanks, guys. Go.
Cheers.
So I think this is back to you now, Alex.
Cool. So the exciting stuff.
Stick burn.
That was the technical stuff. But no, to be honest, this is the stuff that
This is
people
what we're
like you,
interested in.
I want to be excited about.
Cool. So, thank you, Brett. Hopefully, we have a decent understanding now of how Bitcoin actually works in a conceptual kind of aspect. We can go into some more really interesting stuff like peg sidechains and mine in a bit more detail in a bit. But the second, I guess you could say, shorter half of this presentation is just going to go over what we think Bitcoin can actually do for this world. But before we move along, are there any questions you want, clarifications to the last one, or we want to get through that after this one? Cool. So Brett and I'll be able to answer more technical questions afterwards. So this is my beautiful diagram that I think is actually quite interesting. So the blockchain essentially facilitates a network of secure, trustless exchange. That's an interesting little concept to get your head around. So applications of the blockchain are yet unknown. So the way I kind of like to think of this is, we've never had a protocol that enables me to transact with an entire stranger in a totally trustless, decentralized fashion. So I can transfer something worth value to someone else anywhere in the world instantly, and I can trust that system, and no one controls that system. Something like that has never happened before. The first iteration of this technology is Bitcoin. This will change in so many other ways, though. This is the blockchain behind Bitcoin is the interesting thing. Bitcoin is just the really, really basic way to think of value, money. So we would call it Bitcoin. So Bitcoin works like money, but there are so many other applications to blockchain technology that are yet to be kind of explored. So the way I kind of like to think of it is, so you've got the and time frames as well. So how people often ask, how long is Bitcoin going to take off? It's a really interesting question. It's been, I guess, 4 or 5 years now, but I still think it's got a little while to go, particularly with regulation, which is the industry that I'm personally quite interested in. But let's have a quick look at that. So you've got the underlying infrastructure of the internet, you've got your routers, your switches, firewalls, etc., all your cabling that kind of had to come first for the internet to actually function. We need the physical infrastructure to be there. We have TCP/IP on top of that, so how things actually communicate, how that all works, and now you've got the rest of the OSI layer, but I'm cutting that out for this. You've got HTTP, and this is the really interesting one that I like to kind of talk about. So HTTP came around, and when people created HTTP, I bet they didn't think of the likes of Google or Instagram or Facebook. People didn't know what this protocol would create and what it's going to create and how much more it's going to change the world. We don't know. It's an entire industry that we all probably are very involved in. And then you've got blockchain, which to me is on the same kind of scale. This is a protocol that enables incredible technology. So blockchain is what underpins Bitcoin itself. You can see I've got Bitcoin there. There's 2 other technologies I'm going to have a quick chat about, one called Agora and one called Storage. But that's really the interesting thing to me, that we've got this protocol now that can perform, that creates rather a network of secure, trustless exchange. Who knows what that can do? No one. We're currently trying to work that out. So in regards to the interesting projects I talked about before, so one of them is called Agora, which is a decentralized voting system. So it's a transparent and untamperable voting system. This is a problem that I know a lot of countries in the world currently have. Imagine if you could roll out a voting system that cannot be tampered with, that provides total transparency, that everyone can see. This is something that will literally change the way some countries vote. This will change democracy in countries in ways that can't be tampered with. That concept alone to me is mind-boggling, but that's just one of the first iterations of this technology. the next one we've got coming up, which is interesting, which I'm part of the beta for at the moment, is a decentralized storage, which is a decentralized secure file storage system. So I kind of like to think of it as, and Pirate Bay, which got taken down today, which is interesting. But it's a secure, private, encrypted cloud storage network. So think of BitTorrent, but instead of having the entirety of a file, I think you have a certain part of that file, and that tiny part of the file is encrypted with your public key. So you can pull small parts of files from all over the world back to yourself, and each one of those little parts is encrypted, so you can reassemble that file back on your own computer with your key. We're looking at decentralized encrypted file storage. This is something that people literally can't take down. This is a pretty amazing, I think, future of file storage on the internet. And another interesting one, Namecoin, which has its own blockchain, I believe, based off the Bitcoin technology. But essentially the way Namecoin works is it's a decentralized information registration. So think of DNS, but with no censorship possible on top-level domains. So can't just take a certain.com off the internet, which is one of the problems that Pirate Bay and the likes are having. This is so I think of it, I guess the really easy way to conceptualize it for myself is think of the Bitcoin blockchain that's got all those transactions in it. Instead of transactions, it's just got domains. And then you can't take that down because that's a decentralized system that people are mining to keep up and running. So yeah, as you can see, blockchain technology has already been utilized in a plethora of decentralized systems, and the potential security applications for Bitcoin and the underpinning blockchain technology are really yet unknown. We just don't know how far this is going to go. And this is the one, so my background is on governance, risk compliance, and security, so I deal with APRA and PCI DSS all the time, which is not very fun sometimes, but otherwise it's quite interesting. But this is what I think is the real beauty, at least from Bitcoin as a transactional system is concerned. So traditional payment systems pull sensitive data from the consumer, they present it to the merchant for processing by intermediaries in the background. So if I want to buy a pizza online, I have to give my name, I have to give my credit card details. That is my key. I'm giving that away to someone else to transact with. Think of the intermediaries in this stage as to where this needs to go along. That's the exploit points along the way. There's also a lot of friction in that. So when things are traded between other people, there's much larger fees than what Bitcoin has. That kind of backing infrastructure is complex and generally has been proven to be insecure. The beauty of Bitcoin is that it works as a push system. So you literally, with your key, you push a signature up to the blockchain. You say, I want this value to be reallocated to someone else, and that's it. That's the way that works. It is literally that simple. So I think the KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I think the beauty of Bitcoin being a push system compared to the traditional system of a pull system and maintaining within reason your anonymity. We need to explain that one in a little bit more detail because Bitcoin is not entirely anonymous. It's actually pseudonymous, very important one. We can talk about that one a bit later. But the beauty of it is really its simplicity. Cool. So I hope you have a decent understanding of Bitcoin, the underpinning technology, which is the blockchain technology, and kind of appreciate the potential of this technology and how this is, I think, going to change security in the internet and become an entire, almost a network in its own right, almost like a secured, trustless section of the internet, and the applications that will get built on that will, who knows what they'll be. We hope that you can kind of appreciate the enthusiasm and excitement that we have for Bitcoin and blockchain. Cool. Thank you.